Does this show that it's recording on your end? On your screen?
I've
Okay.
never used Google Meet, so I'm not quite sure where to look. Oh, yes. Top left corner.
Is it red?
Yes.
Okay. I have a little bit of a delay with the Wi-Fi here sometimes. Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Haas. I'm a second and third grade teacher in Columbia. I'm also the Midlands area rep for SC for Ed. And we are here this evening talking about Senate District 38 and speaking to candidates so that you all can feel better informed around issues of education as you go to the voting booths to make your selections. So you have two choices. You have a Republican incumbent, Sean Bennett, and then also a Democratic challenger, John Lowe. And I did reach out to both candidates. I did not hear any response from Sean Bennett to join us this evening. So if you would like to know more about his platform, it's specifically his views around education, I would encourage you to reach out to him directly and hope to get a response in that fashion. But I would like to thank the Democratic challenger, John Lowe, for spending some time with us and being here this evening, and maybe just give you an opportunity to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about why you're running for office, and some issues that are of particular interest and importance to you.
Very good. As he said, my name is John Lowe. I'm the Democratic candidate for Senate District 38, which is mostly Dorchester County and a small part of Charleston and Berkeley County. I am running for office this time because I retired last year from South Carolina state government. I'm well enough off that I don't need to go back to work at the moment. So I want to, out of duty, give some time back to where it counts. I feel like I'm very analytical when it comes to not just education issues, but issues that would affect my district throughout um, throughout the scheme of things. I like a chance to be at the table, listen to the problems, do my own research, and come up with solutions either in collaboration with those who are like-minded as far as service, or if need be, pit myself against those who would do harm to our state by not handling things properly. Uh, I've worked for about 20 years in education as a technology support person in two districts. I served in Charleston County School District and Jasper County School District, as well as many years with the South Carolina Department of Education as a regional technology specialist. So while I'm not a K-12 teacher, I've been there and I've observed some of the problems firsthand. I know what many of those problems are, and I'm willing to work with those who are educators and those who are legislators to help fix them. As far as me and myself, you should know that I'm about 60 years old. Like I said, retired from state government. I am enthusiastic, let's put it that way, enthusiastic about making sure those who are in charge of the wallet spend money fairly, discreetly, and without personal agendas. I don't have an agenda as a legislator uh, that will affect many folks. The one thing I'm adamant about is education, not only K-12 education, but college education as well. I feel it's not been done well in this state for many years, and I think that's intentional. I do believe I can help the issue. The other thing that I'm adamant about is civil rights. I believe that we are simply not treating our citizenry as respected members of the community, not just Black folks, not just white folks, but everyone. And I think that we need to fix it. There's too much stratification when it comes to the haves and the have-nots. I believe I can work together with some well-meaning folks to make that work better. With that, I'll yield to your questions.
Great, thank you so much. So my first question, which might feel a little different right now, so people should know, because some people won't be watching this until October, early November. We're filming this in late July, and we're in the midst of COVID-19, this pandemic, and trying to think about what school is going to look like when we return. And you could touch on that a little bit if you want, but you don't have to, because this was really meant to be a more general question. When you look at the state of public education in the state of South Carolina, what are some things that stand out to you? What are some things that you feel like are successes, but also some things that you feel like are maybe concerns as well?
Well, the governor's announcement today that he's going to funnel, I think, $32 million to private schools instead of public schools from public funds. That to me is an issue. That's one of the things that I alliterated to about the stratification. We have to work together or we will all sink together. The governor is not doing right by the public. Uh, we should not take public monies and with uh, impunity apply them to wherever our hearts are. It needs to be a public decision with public money. As far as K-12 education right now, I am very much aware of the corridor of shame that we have along I-95. Fortunately, the Charleston County School District where I worked was not truly a part of that, but Jasper County School District where I worked was. Also, in my services to districts throughout the state, I basically served every school district south of I-26 from the coast to the up country. We are not created equal. We owe it to our rural students to give them a quality education. We owe it to them to supply buildings that are not dilapidated, falling apart. They need to have adequate drinking water in those buildings. They need to have the technology that everyone else has. We can say that we're doing education well, but if we're not being equitable and looking out for the needs of the well-to-do as well as the poor, then we're not doing right by our state. When it comes to college education, I've gone through 3 degrees here. Well, not all in the state of South Carolina, but I know enough about it to know that it's overly expensive for people who are trying to dig themselves out of holes. If you are one of those students who has always had access to what you need, then it's probably fairly easy to get scholarships and have your way paid through K-12 education, through college education. But if you're not, then it's an uphill battle, and it appears from where I've been that there are a lot of folks there who are not there to help these students along. I was the first one in my family to graduate from college. I've heard that story a lot, but there are a lot of folks. I'm encouraged to see that SAT and ACT now are being scrutinized as not harbingers of educational success. That thrills me. I'm good with that. But at the same time, whether it be K-12 or college education, those who are trying to better themselves deserve help doing that. That's not to say I'm going to uh, make it easy for anybody to just walk in and get a piece of paper without doing the work. Yes, those who are willing to do the work need the um, supports, the structure to get them through their educational careers. That applies at college, that applies at K-12. I'm rattling on. Go ahead.
Okay. So my second question is going to build off some of the ideas that you just introduced. So due to a couple of different factors, but large part, certainly the fact that over the last couple of years, teachers across the state have developed a louder voice and a greater willingness to make that heard, we've seen education go from being overlooked many times to being pushed to the top of legislative agendas. But we've had trouble making things happen because there was a lot of disagreement over what should happen first. So, from your perspective, when session returns next January and people go back and look at education, what do you think should be prioritized? What should we look at first when we think about trying to improve our schools, improve the state of education here in the state?
The main thing is, what is a quality education? I know that you guys have stances about around the high stakes testing. I'm a great advocate for formative testing in schools, and I like to see those formative tests truly test what's adequate for student development. We need to know what a student knows at any given point in time and how to get them to the next steps. I'm not quite sure we can do that with 30 students in a classroom at one time and one teacher. Um, I think I haven't got the solution right now, but I believe that there are better ways to do education rather than putting 30 students in front of a single teacher and expecting her to produce with all of them. I believe that the studies all prove that education is a individual sport, if you will, rather than a team sport. Every student learns at his or her own rate, and we need to do better developing the individual student. That's the first place to look. Um, you mentioned the COVID-19, and I realize that some folks will look at this maybe 6 months from now, and COVID-19 hopefully will be a distant memory by that point. But having students go back into the classroom uh, while our society is struggling with this pandemic is a mistake. I think every teacher, every parent needs to stand up and say, no, I'm not comfortable sending my student into that environment, and we need to fix it as a group. Um, I was very disappointed that the governor, who I thought personally had done a pretty good job for the most part with the COVID-19 crisis, I was disappointed to see him follow the party line, so to speak, and talk about getting every student back into classrooms. If we cannot go to the beach safely, which is outdoors, lots of sunshine, lots of chances to social distance, what makes anyone think that we can send thousands of students into classrooms and into school buildings with narrow hallways and come out safely? That's just doesn't make sense.
So my next question, maybe you addressed it, and if you did, that's fine. You can say you don't have anything more to say on it, but it did address the issue of assessment. And what I was going to ask you is, how do you think ultimately we should determine the success of our schools or of our students or how things are going? What do you think that should look like? And you did touch on that. Is there anything more that you want to say about that or no?
Well, I need to just list a caveat. I'm not an educator, so I cannot speak to it fully, but I do know that in the education system, we all need to be on the same page as to what a student needs to know. We need to be able to test that the student knows that. And if the student does not have what he needs, if he's not performing at the level that he needs to on a specific subject, then the educators have to arrange those successes by developing that student.
Okay, perfect. So my last question is going to be one of funding, and I'll start by giving a little bit of context of which you may already know, but just in case, because some people don't, before you answer. So our state they established the formula by which they determine whether or not they are funding our schools. And by their own formula, they've failed to adequately fund our schools for the last 12 years. And really, it reaches far beyond that as well. Um, Most currently, they're underfunding public education by a little over $600 per student. So where we see that in many of our schools is, like, for instance, my school does not have a full-time nurse, or there are schools who don't have enough full-time employees, so you have more crowded classrooms and things of that nature. Or you have stagnated wages where we see great reductions in people in the teaching force because more people are leaving than are coming in, which is not just related to pay, it's related to other things too, but that's certainly a piece of it. So people have different beliefs around funding and what's enough and what it should be. But if funding is an issue of some sort, how do you think the state could go about trying to address that? Do you have any thoughts on that or any potential solutions on how we could address the funding issue? Because we don't want to break the state, we don't want to break taxpayers, but we also want to invest in our kids and our future at the same time. So it's a complicated problem.
I would have to start with a question of how much is enough. Um, do we know that the shortcomings in funding are due to the state funding, or are they coming from other sources? Honestly, I have seen situations where the funding was insufficient. I've also seen situations where the funding was completely adequate, and because we did not have enough of a handle on what education needed to look like to best serve the student body, the students of whatever district, uh, there was still some degree of failure. So I think the larger question is, what is needed? What do we need to accomplish? And then if those state funds are not provided at a full rate, then we should be able to point to what the work that we need to do and say, this is why we need the money. I think that, well, to my knowledge, the EIA and EFA funds, the base student rates and so on are calculated. Whether or not they're fully funded, they haven't been, I don't think, in many years. But again, what do we need the money for? What do we need to be successful? Do we know what we're doing with education? One part is a legislative issue, but the other is educators and our state superintendent, in conjunction with our state superintendent and local superintendents, figuring out exactly what education needs to be.
So those are all my questions. Do you have any final words, topics, anything you would like to say if you could reach out to potential voters right now?
Well, I would just like to say that I will be available to the public should I be elected in November. I would love to have focus groups, groups such as yourself who are advisors to me on a number of different issues, so that when something comes up, I know who to reach out to, know how to get the feedback, and know how to translate that feedback into what's needed to go into a bill at the State House. And that to me is quality constituent service, and serving my own constituents should help the entire state of South Carolina, and that's what we're here for.
Well, I'd like to thank you for spending time with me this evening and sharing a little bit of your platform and your beliefs on education with potential voters in District 38. Thank you.
You're quite welcome.